Do you know the difference between a staff engineer, a tech lead and an architect? Do you want to grow beyond senior, but without becoming a manager? In this video, I'll show you the different career paths you can take beyond senior software engineer. I'll start by showing a flowchart of the different career options. Then I'll talk about the 4 different archetypes of the roles that are available. Lastly, I'll talk about the required skills for when you want to chase such a promotion. Let's get into it. Most companies do not expect software engineers to move beyond senior. It is considered optional. It is considered not for everybody. In addition, it requires a lot more to get that promotion if you compare it to moving from junior to mid-level or from mid-level to senior. A company needs only so many managers. It needs only so many tech leads. The position might simply not be available to you. For these reasons, it's perfectly fine to stay at senior level. Most companies still allow growth in that role, and that's what matters in the end, the job satisfaction and the personal growth. And you can even grow in salary within this senior role at most companies. It's just that your title doesn't change, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I consider an important life skill is knowing when enough is enough. When you try to get that promotion, you also get the added responsibility and you might get the added stress. Are you sure you're ready for it? When moving beyond senior, you are moving from being an individual contributor to being a multiplying contributor. As an individual contributor, your career up until now has been focused on your own growth, your own productivity, effectiveness, and your own happiness. But beyond senior, whatever role you pick, you'll be busy making others more effective, not so much yourself. As a multiplying contributor, the productivity of others is where you will need to focus. The effectiveness of others, the happiness of others, the team culture is suddenly something that you're responsible for. I call this a multiplying contributor because your actions will suddenly have an effect on multiple people, on an entire team. Your scope of influence will increase. Now, before I show you the diagram, every company is different. I'm showing you sort of industry average career framework, but of course there isn't one. Every company has its own career framework. So make sure you look at the right thing. These names are probably different in your company. There might be roles missing. There's companies out there who don't have architects, but they do have the function of architecture. They just organize themselves differently. Even if a role's missing in your career framework, don't assume that you cannot have that role in a different way. So make sure you start having that dialogue with your people manager. As I said before, the junior, mid-level and senior, those are the fat arrows. That's really the only expectation that most companies have from you, from a professional level. You are expected to grow towards senior in so many years, and at some point, once you're there, you're not suddenly expected to become a lead developer or a staff engineer or move to an architect. That's not normal expectation. That will require extra effort from you. Once you do want to move that, you can usually move into the tech lead dev or staff engineer. I could have also mentioned tech lead here. Tech lead is more of a role that can be also executed by a manager or by a principal engineer or by an architect. Tech lead is a role that is a person in a team that facilitates the other team members to be productive, that negotiates with product owners, that unblocks other developers. That person is really active inside of the team. That's its own role. I'll zoom in it in a bit. The architect and the senior and principal architect after that are roles that are outside of teams. An architect is really somebody who looks at software from a different lens, from different dimensions. Okay, let's look at security perspective here. Let's look at the scaling perspective here. But actually, now that you're building this, that other team is doing that. Let's connect to them and transfer ownership, or you should take on ownership of this because they're doing this, but they're not actually owning it. That's the kind of thinking an architect does. A principal engineer is the most individualistic of all these roles. They're an engineer that are usually inside a team for a short amount of time, hopping to another team when this super developer experience is needed that this principal engineer has. And they come because they have developed themselves for many, many years just in this role, being a sort of senior plus. And at that point, they're so experienced, they're so core to what the business is, they can be used on multiple projects. And the last one is manager, which is the person you're usually talking in one-on-ones to, whether it's weekly, monthly, or whatever frequency you use. The person that helps you with your growth in terms of setting your goals at the start of the year, giving you a promotion, or negotiating your salary, or at least giving you like a review at the end of the year. This is how we assess your performance at the end of the year. That's the kind of thing that you would expect from a manager, but a manager has many more responsibilities that we'll zoom into as well. Remember that for these roles, the architect, senior, and the engineering, the principal engineer, distinguished, also the manager tracks. These are sort of the three different tracks. Usually you have to have been a lead developer, staff engineer, or lead dev. It's called different in different companies, but it's usually this. After senior, you have an in-betweener role where you already become a multiplying contributor, and only then you have to sort of specialize. Do you want the manager track? Do you want the architect track? And the moment you specialize, it isn't fixed or set in stone at that point. I myself have moved from lead dev to principal engineer. Then I've decided to become an architect and a senior architect. And at that point, I decided to move completely horizontally on the scale and became a senior manager at that point. So I've also done multiple roles at the same time. It is common for smaller teams or teams that are highly capable to have a sort of tech lead, architect in one, and sometimes tech leads are also managers. It's definitely possible to combine these roles and to shift around. It's not that you're set in stone at that point once you picked it, so don't be afraid of that. Archetype number one is the lead, also called the tech lead, the team lead, lead developer, lead engineer, or staff engineer. It's an in-team role. You're a sort of team leader. It's most common that every team has exactly one tech lead. You are leading by empowering. You are leading by facilitating. You are being glue. I'll explain this a bit in the future what this means. But for me, it's the concept of facilitating others, unblocking others. You're very aware of what others are doing, what roadblocks they're running into. Oh, they need the product owner's unavailable, but you also have this domain knowledge, then you'll step in to do that. Oh, there's one person waiting on another because of a code review. Is that person really prioritizing right? Maybe we should swap priorities here. Maybe you can do some of that, or you can do the code review. You're making sure the team gets stuff done, whatever that takes. That's a whole lot of different tasks that could be on your plate there. And the beauty of team lead, tech lead, is that your role differs a lot week by week. Some week you're coding a lot, and some weeks you're not coding at all. And usually, on average, you can see this as you're half senior dev, half other things. You're, for example, also responsible for the dev culture, for refining the development process that you have, the software development process, making sure things actually get done. Not a bit done, not it still needs to be tested or accepted by the product owner. No, actually done, actually in production. Archetype number two is that of the super engineer, also known as the staff engineer, the lead engineer, or the principal engineer, even the distinguished engineer if you have the even more senior variant of that. It's still an in-team role, but you do tend to move around a lot to other teams as well. You're often in teams for a short time. You're hired, you're lent in to solve a specific problem, a very specific thing that you know because you already have the domain knowledge, or a very problematic problem that is very complex, that requires your expertise, your thoroughness in certain things. Or you might be joining a new team to set up a new project, to set the bar of quality. This is what the new team will now continue with, but at least they know this is where the bar is. We have to start reaching for that. As a super engineer, you're leading by inspiring, by being exemplary in being a software engineer. You've got so much experience now. You've just kept on learning and learning and learning. You've seen so many different contexts as a senior software engineer that now you've become more than a senior, but you are in principle still a software engineer. You know a lot of different programming languages, different paradigms. As this is the most individualistic role of these four archetypes that I'm presenting, most organizations don't have this, or have only one or two people, because it's very risky for an organization to lean too much into this type of thing, because that individual, that super engineer, doesn't scale as a team scales. If that person leaves, the organization has a big problem. Especially if they're so experienced and have so much knowledge about a specific domain, or a specific complex technology or whatever, then What if that person leaves? That's a big risk. It's better to get that experience, that knowledge, that capability into a team, which if one person leaves, sure, you have a bunch left. You can still scale that team. You can grow into a bigger team if that's necessary. You can grow into a smaller team. That's a different way of managing things. Organizations are usually built around managing teams because it's just an effective way of doing things. And thirdly, the architect. Architects are often responsible for multiple teams because they're responsible for a domain or a subdomain, and that encompasses multiple teams by accident. So they're responsible for all of that. They're viewing the business from a slightly different angle. They're not about this own service or about this specific UI that we're delivering. No, they're about this whole thing that the business has as a capability and that is being delivered as a value to the customer, or multiple values combined that just happen to be related in some way. Architects lead by giving direction, by letting go of details. They're often not software developers anymore. They are people who think about software from a different dimension. They may look at software from the perspective of scalability or from security, and again, from a cross-team perspective. They can join teams for a temporary time to sort of loan experience, like a team might be having a problem that requires architectural experience, and then that architect might join for a sprint to help them solve this problem. But then again, that architect would leave again afterwards because that team has been helped. It can now continue again. Architects focus on software quality, on high-level software, how it cooperates, how the microservice landscape, what it looks like, what arrows are pointing in what direction, what data flow effectively is moving, and why is all of that happening. They think about the coupling of these different things. Are these responsibilities in the right teams? Is there a responsibility that multiple teams have as a sort of vaguely defined thing? Is there something that is not owned by a team, and should that be assigned to a team? That is the kind of thing that an architect also thinks of, like what responsibilities, capabilities, or values for the user are assigned to what teams. Where are the team boundaries? There's a way of thinking in the Team Topologies book that speaks about team boundaries, team APIs, and value streams. That's the way of thinking of the architects. Now, architects can write code, but they don't often do. And when they do, it's not even production code usually. It's foundational code that may be used for a new language, a new technology, or a new service that needs to be implemented. Like, okay, we should do it this and this way. Now the important coupling and separation of concern decisions are made. Now I'll leave you to finish it. I have the security perspective to also look at, and that is when the team takes over. That's the kind of role that the architect has. Now, the old model of the architect is a model where the architects are drawing diagrams and making decisions, and then these decisions, once they have been made, are communicated to the teams to then start executing. This is a sort of waterfall model where this is called the ivory tower architecture, where teams are basically waiting and they're being blocked by the architect. I don't like this model for this reason. It hinders velocity. And I think a more modern version of this is where architecture is a capability that a team can lend in. Yes, there may be people who have that specific role and title of an architect, but I'm not even married to that idea. There may also be a principal developer or a manager that has that capability that assists the team when it needs it. And then they can pull in this capability, use that for a sprint, and once it's done, it's done. I think of architecture more as an expertise or a capability that you need at some point, but often you don't really need it. You don't need it all the time. And the fourth archetype is that of the manager, also known as the people manager, the development manager, or the engineering manager. Now, it's not really a defining feature whether this person is located in a team or outside of a team. It can be both. What you often see is that more junior managers are still inside of a team with other developers, and they may be also having the role of tech lead, maybe having these two roles together. Or as they become more senior, they may leave the team. They may be an engineering manager of multiple teams. It really depends on the organization here. The main responsibility of a manager is growing individuals. It's developing people into better versions of themselves. And this is usually done through one-on-one meetings that you have weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly, or whatever with your manager, where you discuss progress, you discuss the frustrations that you have in your team. I very much, as a manager, like to optimize for frustration as well. if you have a frustration, there's probably a really good reason. There may be something wrong in the process. There may be something wrong in the cooperation you have with this person. There could be many things wrong. There may be a skill missing. All of these things, frustrations, usually hint at something where we should work on that. Job satisfaction is, for a manager, a very important thing to optimize for. Common things for organizations are yearly performance cycles. At the beginning of the year, you set goals. Halfway the year, you have an official check-in. At the end of the year, the manager does an assessment of your performance, and there may be a promotion or salary or bonuses tied to that kind of thing. That's all company specific, of course, but that's the job of the manager. Managers are often also hiring managers, because recognizing the right skills when hiring people is also something you need to do in your one-on-ones on your daily job as a manager, because you're growing people, you're hiring people. You need to do that same kind of behavioral skill and technical skill, pattern matching and coaching that is also true for hiring, which is why these roles are often combined. Sometimes the hiring manager is a different role. It can be assigned to anybody, but it's often a manager that does that. Managers develop people through having regular one-on-ones. This one-on-one meeting that you have in your calendar is a platform to which the manager gets to know you. You get to discuss whether you're happy, whether you're not happy, how quickly you are developing your things, how your cooperation with other developers is, how whatever. This platform, this one-on-one meeting can really be used for anything. A good manager, in my opinion, really gets to know you. Also your private life, your hobbies, your family, if you have them. That kind of thing is really relevant to a manager, because that manager at the end of the year has to judge you by giving you a performance review. And the manager can do, I think, very much a better job if they know what's behind you, what's behind your decisions, what you're thinking, how you're reasoning. Because only if they really get to know you, they can make a fair call. And I think that's really true, and why the one-on-one, the regular meeting that you have, is really important to actually connect. These ideas come from Crucial Conversations, a very important book, I think, for all people managers. When managers become more senior, you also become responsible for organizational design, which is somewhat overlap with the architect, where I recommended the book Team Topologies for Architects, but it's also very relevant for managers, because as you get more experienced, you get to have this human view on what domains should be owned by what teams. How should new teams be set up? How do you build a set of people with personalities, personal behavioral skills and technical skills? How do you combine all these things into this capability, matching that to a specific business domain or a specific value stream, as Team Topology defines it? Does that make sense for these kind of people to own this kind of responsibility? Should it be split across two different teams? Is this team API, this team boundary, does that make sense for their effectiveness? Can they really be autonomous in this way? And how do they cooperate with other teams? In what mode do they cooperate? Is it as a service? Is it collaboration? All these kind of questions need to be answered by higher level leadership, and that's often senior architects or senior managers that do these kind of things. Let's talk about the required skills. Beyond senior, whatever you do, you need a set of behavioral skills that will help you be effective. I very much like the talk that Tanya Riley has given on being glue. Let me quote something. You'd like to have time to code, but nobody else is onboarding the junior engineers, updating the roadmap, talking to the users, noticing the things that got dropped, asking questions on design documents, and making sure that everyone's going roughly in the same direction. If you stop doing these things, the team won't be as successful. I think this is a very nice way of saying there's a million things that need to be done to make a team successful. If we all turn up and write code for 8 hours a day and nothing gets managed, you won't have a successful product. And that's really the point here. The thing is that people need to do glue work, and Tanya makes has a very good talk on it. She gave it on Lead Dev, by the way, also a conference that if you're interested in growing beyond senior, you might want to take a look at leaddev.com. Tanya gave a talk, 30 minutes. It's worth watching. She also has a book nowadays. there's a whole range of personal leadership skills that will assist you in executing these roles. It doesn't matter whether it's being a manager, being a staff engineer, being an architect, with whichever path you take. It all requires leadership skills. You need to be able to empathize, you need to be able to listen, you need to be able to give direction by asking questions, by being a non-intrusive communicator, by not interrupting. As a leader, you are suddenly a role model. People literally look up to you, whether it's in the hierarchy or not. You're a more senior, more experienced person. So now you are a role model. Whether you like it or not, that's the case. So it's good to have a sort of respectful communication as your baseline. Now suddenly everything and everyone is okay. We start by looking at face value of things. We respond to people's opinions and we attack the opinion or the ID, not the person. Being a role model becomes increasingly more important as you become more senior, more experienced in even the architect or the manager role. Other skills worth mentioning are coaching, mentoring, delegating in a nice way. Delegating can be a very difficult skill to learn because often when you delegate as a more senior person to a junior or whatever the relationship and the experience difference there is, that person will not have the same quality standard as you, that person will have a different way of working, and you need to let go. And that takes some people quite a lot of time to learn. How do you actually delegate something in a nice way? How do you explain the why and talk about the what together with that person instead of telling them how to do it? Because the moment you start to micromanage this person, you don't tell them the why, but you only tell them the how, they won't enjoy their job. And that's the kind of thing that really makes or breaks you as a leader, whether you have such a skill. Another important one is your personal organizational skills, such as note-taking and time management. When you grow into a role with more responsibility, with a larger scope, you suddenly also have to have a lot more information in your head. You have to have a lot more knowledge, and maybe it's too much for the brain. The brain is not good at storing things. The brain is good at having ideas. So whenever you have an idea, store it somewhere else. Build a second brain in a tool like Notion or Obsidian, which is a really good networked thought note-taking system, which can probably help you if you need to jot down a lot. And it's also important to realize that the environment needs to support a promotion, especially if you're in the situation where right now you're a team which has multiple peers and one of these people gets a promotion to be the architect, the tech lead, or the manager, or whatever is going on. The moment one person is promoted and therefore others are not, then that better be the right person. As managers, you have to make this decision, of course, but when you want to get that kind of promotion, one way of getting it is making sure you are the most respected communicator, most respected developer, most respected organizer. You're the one that gets everything across the line. Everything is now done. Everybody likes to work with you. You are helping everybody get their stuff done. You have naturally you've already become the glue in the last year or whatever. Therefore, the promotion comes natural to you. In fact, personal leadership skills, you can practice them at any level. You can, as a senior or mid-level, it doesn't matter, even as a junior, you can practice these natural leadership skills. You can be the glue in the team if you are not the tech lead. At some point, the company will recognize this and will award you for this. And lastly, I have a book recommendation. The book is called Staff Engineer: Leadership Beyond the Management Track by Will Larson. I highly recommend reading it for anybody who wants to grow beyond the senior role that we just discussed, isn't sure where to fit in the organization. It describes in even more detail than I've just done, like what the different potential paths are you can work on, what it could look like, how you can shape your own role, how you can find the promotion within your current company, in another company, what all the roles look like. I highly recommend reading it. It discusses the roles that are not engineering management, so principal, architect, tech lead, whatever, but it also actually refers to good engineering management books. So if you still want to go into that, it doesn't matter where you want to go on the diagram, the flowchart I showed you. For all of these roles, it's actually good to have read this book. It's sort of the best literature right now, I think, on it. And that's it. I hope this was helpful. If you have any thoughts or if you have a request for a future video, leave a comment and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching.